Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Researchers and conservationists stress that biodiversity loss due to invasive species is blank. For example, people can take simple steps such as washing their footwear after travel to avoid introducing potentially invasive organisms into new environments. So answer choice A says preventable. This seems to be correct because the second sentence highlights how biodiversity loss due to invasive species can be avoided or stopped. So A seems to be the correct answer. B, undeniable. This is incorrect because the second sentence doesn't highlight how biodiversity loss due to invasive species is undeniable or that it can't be denied. C, common. This is incorrect because, like B, the second sentence doesn't discuss how biodiversity loss due to invasive species is common or that it occurs regularly. Rather, it discusses how biodiversity loss can be avoided or stopped. D, concerning. This is incorrect because although the second sentence implies that biodiversity loss due to invasive species is concerning, it more so focuses on how it can be avoided. So D is incorrect, and the correct choice is A. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? It is by no means blank to recognize the influence of Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch on Ali Benisadr's paintings. Indeed, Benisadr himself cites Bosch as an inspiration. However, some scholars have suggested that the ancient Mesopotamian work, Epic of Gilgamesh, may have had a far greater impact on Benisadr's work. A, substantial. This is incorrect because substantial would imply that it's not substantial to recognize the influence of Bosch on Benisadr's paintings. But the phrase here, indeed Benisadr himself cites Bosch as an inspiration, disproves that. So A is incorrect. B, satisfying. This is incorrect because the whole text isn't talking about satisfaction. C, unimportant. This seems to be correct because it would imply that it's not unimportant to recognize the influence of Bosch on Benisadr's paintings, and the second sentence reaffirms this by saying that although it's not important, this other work may have had more influence on Benisadr's paintings. So C seems to be the correct answer. D, appropriate. This is incorrect for the same reason as A, because it implies that it's not appropriate to recognize the influence of Bosch on Benisadr's paintings, but the phrase, indeed Benisadr himself cites Bosch as an inspiration, disproves that. So D is incorrect, meaning the correct choice is C, unimportant. Which choice best describes the function of the second sentence and the overall structure of the text? Astronomers are confident that the star Betelgeuse will eventually consume all the helium in its core and explode in a supernova. They are much less confident, however, about when this will happen, since that depends on internal characteristics of Betelgeuse that are largely unknown. Astrophysicist Serafina El-Badri Nance and colleagues recently investigated whether acoustic waves in the star could be used to determine internal stellar states, but concluded that this method could not sufficiently reveal Betelgeuse's internal characteristics to allow its evolutionary state to be firmly fixed. So option A says it explains how the work of Nance and colleagues was received by others in the field. Sentence 2 doesn't discuss how others in the field received the work of Nance and colleagues, and it doesn't introduce Nance and colleagues yet, so A is wrong. B, it presents a central finding reported by Nance and colleagues. The central finding is seen in sentence 3, where it says that the method they used couldn't sufficiently reveal Betelgeuse's internal characteristics. And instead, the second sentence discusses the problem, which is that they didn't know the internal characteristics of Betelgeuse. So B is wrong. C, it identifies the problem that Nance and colleagues attempted to solve but did not. This is correct because second sentence shows that the problem is that they didn't know the internal characteristics of Betelgeuse, and that they investigated whether they could use acoustic waves in the star to determine internal stellar states, but this method couldn't reveal Betelgeuse's internal characteristics. So C seems to be correct. And D, it describes a serious limitation of the method used by Nance and colleagues. Sentence 2 doesn't even introduce Nance and colleagues yet, so D can't be correct. So C is the correct answer. Which choice best describes the function of the third sentence and the overall structure of the text? The mimosa tree evolved in East Asia, where the beetle, Prychidis tyrannus preys on its seeds. In 1785, mimosa trees were introduced to North America far from any B. tyrannus, but evolutionary links between predators and their prey can persist across centuries and continents. Around 2001, B. tyrannus was introduced in southeastern North America, near where botanist Xu Mei Cheng and colleagues had been monitoring mimosa trees. Within a year, 93% of the trees had been attacked by the beetles. So the third sentence says, but evolutionary links between predators and their prey can persist across centuries and continents. And option A says, it states that the hypothesis that Chang and colleagues had set out to investigate using mimosa trees and B. tyrannus. So this is incorrect because Chang and colleagues had been monitoring the mimosa trees. They didn't make a hypothesis about them. B. It presents a generalization that is exemplified by the discussion of mimosa trees and B. tyrannus. This seems correct because the mimosa trees back in East Asia were attacked by B. tyrannus, and when these mimosa trees were introduced to North America, and so were B. tyrannus, the mimosa trees were again attacked by the beetles. And this shows how the evolutionary links between predators and their prey can persist across centuries and continents. In this case, continents. So B seems the correct answer. C. It offers an alternative explanation for the findings of Chang and colleagues. The text doesn't include an explanation for the findings of Chang and colleagues, so C is incorrect. D. It provides context that clarifies why the species mentioned spread to new locations. But this is incorrect because the sentence, but evolutionary links between predators and their prey can persist across centuries and continents, is a generalization. It doesn't mention a specific species. So B is correct. Based on the text, how would Focarelli and Panetta, text 2, most likely respond to Fan's findings, text 1? When companies in the same industry propose merging with one another, they often claim that the merger will benefit consumers by increasing efficiency and therefore lowering prices. Economist Ying Fan investigated this notion in the context of the United States newspaper market. She modeled a hypothetical merger of Minneapolis area newspapers and found that subscription prices would rise following a merger. Text 1 shows that if a company were to merge with other companies, the subscription prices would rise, meaning that it would be disadvantage for the consumers. Text 2. Economists Dario Focarelli and Fabio Panetta have argued that research on the effect of mergers on prices have focused excessively on short-term effects, which tend to be adverse for consumers. Using the case of consumer banking in Italy, they show that over the long term, several years of their study, the efficiency gains realized by merged companies do result in economic benefits for consumers. So text 2 shows that over the long term, several years maybe, that there would be efficiency gains from merged companies, and that would result in economic benefits for consumers. So option A says they would argue that over the long term, the expenses incurred by the merged newspaper company will also increase. This is incorrect because right here it says the efficiency gains realized by the merged companies do result in economic benefits for consumers, meaning that the merged companies would see a decrease in their expenses, not an increase. B. They would recommend that Fan compare the near-term effect of a merger on subscription prices in the Minneapolis area with the effect of a merger in another newspaper market. This is incorrect because the economists in text 2 focused on time, not on location. C. They would encourage Fan to investigate whether the projected effect on subscription prices persists over an extended period. This seems to be correct because the economists did focus on time, and they found that over a long time, an extended period, there would be efficiency gains for merged companies. So C seems to be the correct answer. D. They would claim that mergers have a different effect on consumer prices in the newspaper industry than in most other industries. This is incorrect because the economists in text 2 focused on time, not on the different industries. And they generalized that every merged company over a long period of time has economic benefits for consumers. So D is wrong, and C is the correct answer. According to the text, what is true about Eleanor? The following text is from Jane Austen's 1811 novel, Sense and Sensibility. Eleanor lives with her younger sisters and her mother, Mrs. Dashwood. Eleanor, this eldest daughter whose advice was so effectual, possessed the strength of understanding and coolness of judgment which qualified her, though only 19, to be the counsellor of her mother and enabled her frequently to counteract, to the advantage of them all, that eagerness of mind in Mrs. Dashwood, which must generally have led to imprudence. She had an excellent heart, her disposition was affectionate, and her feelings were strong, but she knew how to govern them. It was a knowledge of which her mother had yet to learn, and which one of her sisters had resolved never to be taught. So, option A says, Eleanor often argues with her mother, but fails to change her mind. This is incorrect because in the text, it does say that she was the counselor of her mother and frequently counteracted her. It doesn't say that she argued with her mother and failed to change her mind. B. Eleanor can be overly sensitive with regard to family matters. Here it says that her feelings were strong, but that she knew how to govern them, and she doesn't say that she was overly sensitive with regard to family matters. C. Eleanor thinks her mother is a bad role model. This is incorrect because in the text it doesn't say anywhere what Eleanor thought of her mother. D. Eleanor is relatively mature for her age. This is correct because here it lists a number of qualities of Eleanor, and then it says though only 19, emphasizing how she was so young, but she had these mature qualities. So D is the correct option. Based on the text, what is true about Miss Ochiltree's acquaintances? The following text is adapted from Charles W. Chesnutt's 1901 novel, The Mare of Tradition. Miss Ochiltree was a woman of strong individuality, whose comments upon her acquaintances, present or absent, were marked by a frankness at times no less than startling. This characteristic caused her to be more or less avoided. Miss Ochiltree was aware of this sentiment on the part of her acquaintances, and rather exulted in it. So option A says they try to refrain from discussing topics that would upset Miss Ochiltree. This is incorrect because in the text it didn't say that her acquaintances refrained from discussing topics that would upset her. It says that they just avoided Miss Ochiltree. So A is incorrect. B. They are unable to spend as much time with Miss Ochiltree as she would like. This is incorrect because in the passage it doesn't say that Miss Ochiltree would like to spend more time with her acquaintances. Rather, it says that she knew that her acquaintances avoided her and that she exulted in it, which means that she liked it. C. They are too preoccupied with their own concerns to speak with Miss Ochiltree. This is incorrect because in the text it didn't say that her acquaintances were preoccupied with their own concerns. Rather, it just says that they avoided her. D. They are likely offended by what Miss Ochiltree has said about them. This makes sense because it says that Miss Ochiltree's comments about her acquaintances were marked by a frankness that at times was startling, and this characteristic caused her to be more or less avoided by her acquaintances. So it would make sense that because her comments were startling, and that her acquaintances avoided her, that they were offended by what Miss Ochiltree had said about them. So D is the correct answer. What is the main idea of the text? The following text is adapted from William Shakespeare's 1609 poem, Sonnet 27. The poem is addressed to a close friend as if he were physically present. Weary with toil, I hurry to my bed. The dear repose for limbs would travel tired. But then begins a journey in my head, to work my mind when body's work's expired. For then my thoughts, from far where I abide, begin a zealous pilgrimage to thee, and keep my drooling eyelids open wide. So choice A says, the speaker is asleep and dreaming about traveling to see the friend. This is incorrect, because the speaker is awake, seen here when it says that he's about to go to sleep, but then he begins thinking about his friend. And at the end of the poem it says, and keep my drooping eyelids open wide, meaning that these thoughts about his friend keep him from sleeping. B. The speaker is planning an upcoming trip to the friend's house. This is incorrect, because the speaker isn't planning a literal trip to his friend's house. it's more of a metaphor for him thinking about his friend. C. The speaker is too fatigued to continue discussion with a friend. This is incorrect because the friend isn't actually here. The speaker is thinking about his friend. D. The speaker is thinking about the friend instead of immediately falling asleep. This is correct because here it says that he's about to go to sleep, but then he begins thinking about his friend. And at the end, it also proves this by showing how these thoughts keep him from sleeping, that he's still awake. So D is the correct choice. Which finding from Granado and Alvarez's research, if true, would most directly support their claim? Black beans are a nutritionally dense food, but they are difficult to digest, in part because of their high levels of soluble fiber and compounds like raffinose. They also contain anti-nutrients like tannins and trypsin inhibitors, which interfere with the body's ability to extract nutrients from foods. In a research article, Mareleso Granito and Glenda Alvarez from Simon Bolivar University in Venezuela claim that inducing fermentation of black beans using lactic acid bacteria improves the digestibility of the beans and makes them more nutritious. So the claim here is that fermenting the black beans improves their digestibility and makes them more nutritious. So answer choice A says, when cooked, fermented beans contain significantly more trypsin inhibitors and tannins, with significantly less soluble fiber and raffinose than non-fermented beans. So this is incorrect because tannins and trypsin inhibitors are shown to interfere with the body's ability to extract nutrients from foods, meaning that the beans having more of these trypsin inhibitors, tannins, would make the beans less nutritious. So A is incorrect. B. Fermented beans contain significantly less soluble fiber and raffinose than non-fermented beans, and when cooked, the fermented beans also displayed a significant reduction in trypsin inhibitors and tannins. So this seems to be correct, because it says here that the beans are difficult to digest because of their high levels of soluble fiber and compounds like raffinose. So a reduction in the amount of soluble fiber and raffinose would make them easier to digest. And when cooked, the beans also displayed a significant reduction in trypsin inhibitors and tannins. So, like as before, the tannins and trypsin inhibitors interfere with the body's ability to extract nutrients from foods. So a reduction in tannins and trypsin inhibitors would mean that the beans would be more nutritious. So A seems to be the correct choice. C. When the fermented beans were analyzed, they were found to contain two microorganisms, Lactobacillus cesae and Lactobacillus plantarum, that are theorized to increase the amount of nitrogen absorbed by the gut after eating beans. So this is wrong, because it doesn't say in the passage anything about nitrogen and how it affects the nutrient intake or the digestibility of the beans. So the fact that the nitrogen intake is increased by the gut after eating these beans is unrelated. D. Both fermented and non-fermented black beans contain significantly fewer trypsin inhibitors and tannins after being cooked at high pressure. This is incorrect because it doesn't differentiate between fermented and non-fermented black beans, meaning that it doesn't show that fermenting the beans makes them more digestible and more nutritious. So D is incorrect, and B is the correct choice. Which choice most effectively uses data from the table to complete the example? Earth's atmosphere is bombarded by cosmic dust originating from several sources: short-period comets, SPCs, particles from the asteroid belt, ASTs, Halley-type comets, HTCs, and Oort cloud comets, OCCs. Some of the dust's material vaporizes in the atmosphere in a process called ablation, and the faster the particles move, the higher the rate of ablation. Astrophysicist Juan Diego Carrillo Sanchez led a team that calculated average ablation rates for elements in the dust, such as iron and potassium, and showed that material in slower-moving SPC or AST dust at a lower rate than the same material in a faster-moving HTC or OCC dust. For example, whereas the average ablation rate for iron from AST dust is 28%, average rate for blank. So, right off the bat, we can eliminate B and D, because it says here that comparing material in SPC or AST dust has a lower rate than the same material in HTC or OCC dust. So the example uses iron here, so the comparing it with something else, it must also be iron. So sodium cannot be compared to. And so between A and C, C is the correct choice, because here it says that SPC or AST dust has a lower rate than material in HTC or OCC dust. And this example serves to show a contrast between iron and a slow-moving material like AST dust with a fast-moving one like HTC or OCC. And here it says that iron from HTC dust is 90%, so C is the correct choice. Which choice most effectively uses data from the graph to illustrate the claim? High levels of public uncertainty about which economic policies a country will adopt can make planning difficult for businesses, but measures of such uncertainty have not tended to be very detailed. Recently, however, economist Sandil Hillish-Wido analyzed trends in news reports to derive measures not only for general economic policy uncertainty, but also for uncertainty related to specific areas of economic policy, like tax or trade policy. One revelation of her work is that a general measure may not fully reflect uncertainty about specific areas of policy, as in the case of the United Kingdom, where general economic policy uncertainty blank A aligned closely with uncertainty about tax and public spending policy in 2005, but differed from uncertainty about tax and public spending policy by a large amount in 2009. So this graph shows that the gray bar represents tax and public spending policy, the white bar represents trade policy, and the black bar represents general economic policy. And answer choice A says that general economic policy uncertainty aligned closely with uncertainty about tax and public spending policy in 2005. This is correct, because the black bar, general economic policy, is very close to the gray bar, tax and public spending policy. But the second part, general economic policy uncertainty, differed from uncertainty about tax and public spending policy by a large amount in 2009, is incorrect, because in 2009 the black bar, general economic policy, is very close to the gray bar, tax and public spending policy, so A is incorrect. B was substantially lower than uncertainty about tax and public spending policy each year from 2005 to 2010. So this is saying that general economic policy uncertainty was lower than tax and public spending policy for each year from 2005 to 2010. But this is incorrect, because in the year 2006, 2007, and 2009, the black bar is greater than the gray bar, meaning that general economic policy was greater than tax and public spending policy uncertainty in these years. So B is incorrect. C reached its highest level between 2005 and 2010, in the same year that uncertainty about trade policy and tax and public spending policy reached their lowest levels. This is incorrect, because the year that general economic policy uncertainty reached its highest levels was 2010. And in the same year, the tax and public spending policy also reached its highest level, not its lowest level. So C is incorrect. D was substantially lower than uncertainty about trade policy in 2005, and substantially higher than uncertainty about trade policy in 2010. So this is saying that general economic policy was lower than uncertainty about trade policy in 2005. And this is correct, because the black bar is smaller than the white bar representing trade policy, and the black general economic policy. And the second part, the general economic policy, was substantially higher than uncertainty about trade policy in 2010. This is correct also, because the black bar is far taller than the white bar in 2010. So D is the correct choice. Which choice best describes data from the table that supports the researcher's hypothesis? When hibernating, Alaska marmots and Arctic ground squirrels enter a state called torpor, which minimizes the energy their bodies need to function. Often, a hibernating animal will temporarily come out of torpor, called an arousal episode, and its metabolic rate will rise, burning more of the precious energy the animal needs to survive the winter. Alaska marmots hibernate in groups, and therefore burn less energy keeping warm during these episodes than they would if they were alone. A researcher hypothesized that because Arctic ground squirrels hibernate alone, they likely exhibit longer bouts of torpor and shorter arousal episodes than Alaska marmots. So this table here shows Alaska marmots and Arctic ground squirrels comparing their torpor bouts, duration per bout in days, arousal episodes, and duration per episode. And the claim here is that the because the Arctic ground squirrel hibernates alone, they would have longer bouts of torpor, which would compare these values, and shorter arousal episodes than Alaska marmots, which would be comparing these values. So choice A says, the Alaska marmot's arousal episode lasts for days, while the Arctic ground squirrel's arousal episode lasts for less than a day. This is incorrect for two reasons. One, the hypothesis is about both the length of the bouts of torpor and the length of the arousal episodes. But this option A only discusses the length of arousal episode. And also because the information here is wrong. It's saying that the Alaska marmot's arousal episode lasted for days, whereas it's only lasting for 21.2 hours, which is less than a day. B. Alaska marmots and the Arctic ground squirrels both maintain torpor for several consecutive days per bout on average. So this is incorrect because, like A, it only discusses the bouts of torpor, not talking about arousal episodes. C. Alaska marmots had shorter torpor bouts and longer arousal episodes than the Arctic ground squirrels did. So this is saying that Alaska marmots had shorter torpor bouts, which is true because they had 13.81 days of torpor bouts, while the Arctic ground squirrels had 16.77 days, and longer arousal episodes, which is also true because their arousal episodes were 21.2 hours, whereas the ground squirrel was only 14.2 hours. So C seems to be the correct answer. D. Alaska marmots had more torpor bouts than arousal episodes, but their arousal episodes were much shorter than their torpor bouts. This is incorrect because the hypothesis compares the Arctic ground squirrels with Alaska marmots, whereas this option only discusses the Alaska marmots. So D is incorrect, and C is the correct choice. Which choice most effectively uses data from the table to complete the statement? Over the past 200 years, the percentage of the population employed in the agriculture sector has declined in both France and the United States, while employment in the service sector, which includes jobs in retail, consulting, real estate, etc., has risen. However, this transition happened at very different rates in the two countries. This can be seen most clearly by comparing the employment by sector in both countries in blank. So this table here shows the agriculture, manufacturing, and services in France and in the United States from the year 1800 to 2012. And it asks us to find 2 years where the rates are very different for the two countries. The rate is the movement from agriculture to services. So A here says 1900 was employment by sector in 1950. So agriculture in France in 1900 was at 43%, and in 1950 it was at 32%, which is 11% decrease. Services in France were at 28% in 1900, and in 1950 it was at 35%, so a 7% increase. In the United States, agriculture in 1900 was at 41%, in 1950 14%, so this is a 27% decrease compared to France's 11% decrease. And services in 1900 was at 31%, and in 1950 was at 53%. So services increased by 21% compared to France's 7%, which is 3 times greater. So A definitely seems like it could be the correct choice. B. 1800 was employment by sector in 2012. So in 1800, agriculture in France was at 64%, 2012 it was at 3%, so 61% decrease. Services in France in 1800 was at 14%, 2012 76%, so this is a 62% increase. And agriculture in the US in 1800 was at 68%, in 2012 2%, so 66% decrease. Services in 1800 was at 13%, and in 2012 it was at 80%, so this is a 67% increase. So comparing these numbers, 61% increase in agriculture for France, and agriculture for US, 66% decrease. So these numbers look to be very similar, so B is not correct. C. 1900 was employment by sector in 2012. So in 1900, agriculture in France was at 43%, 2012, 3%, so 40% decrease. Services were at 28% in 1900 for France, and 2012 it was at 76%, so this is a 48% increase. Agriculture in the US in the 1900s was at 41%, 2012 2%, so this is a 39% decrease. So comparing these numbers, you can see the 40% decrease in agriculture for France and a 39% decrease in agriculture for US between these 2 years means that their rates are very similar, which is not what we're looking for. D. 1800 with employment by sector in 1900. So in 1800, France was at 64%, 1900 it was at 43%. So this is a 21% decrease. Services in France, 14%, 1900 it was at 28%, so 14% increase. Agriculture in the US, 68% in 1800, and 1900 is at 41%. So this is a 27% decrease. France is at a 21% decrease. So this looks to be very similar. So this is also incorrect, meaning A is the correct answer choice. Which choice most logically completes the text? Euphorbia isula leafy spurge is a reagent plant that has become invasive in North America, where it displaces native vegetation and sickens cattle. E. isula can be controlled with chemical herbicides, but that approach can also kill harmless plants nearby. Recent research on introducing engineered DNA into plant species to inhibit their reproduction may offer a path toward exclusively targeting E. isula, consequently blank. So option A says making individual E. isula plants more susceptible to existing chemical herbicides. This is incorrect because the engineered DNA would inhibit the reproduction of E. isula and exclusively target the E. isula, meaning that it would limit the numbers of E. isula without harming other plants, so there would be no need for chemical herbicides. B. Enhancing the ecological benefits of E. isula in North America. This is incorrect because the text doesn't describe any ecological benefits of E. isula, and inhibiting their reproduction would mean reducing their numbers, and reducing their numbers wouldn't enhance their ecological benefits. C. Enabling cattle to consume E. isula without becoming sick. This is wrong for the same reason as B, because inhibiting their reproduction would mean reducing their numbers, and reducing the amount of E. isula wouldn't enable cattle to consume it. D. Reducing invasive E. isula numbers without harming other organisms. This is correct because the chemical herbicides would control the E. isula population, but would also kill plants nearby. But the engineered DNA would inhibit the reproduction of E. isula, which would exclusively target E. isula, meaning that it would limit the population of E. isula without harming other plants. So D is correct. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? Both Sonu Karapotra, an Indian American, and Doniel Clayton, an African American, grew up frustrated by the lack of diverse characters in books for young people. In 2011, these two writers joined forces to found Cake Literacy, a book packaging blank specializes in the creation and promotion of stories told from diverse perspectives for children and young adults. So choice A says company, comma. This is incorrect because there's no need for comma here, and it's missing a connecting pronoun. B. Company that. This is correct because there's no need for a comma, and it has a connecting pronoun, that. So B seems to be the correct choice. C. Company. This is incorrect because it's missing the connecting pronoun, and in this case it should be that. And if you were to put this in to the blank, you could clearly see that it doesn't make sense. D. Company, comma, that. This is incorrect because there's no need for a comma between company and that. This is one phrase, so there's no need for a comma. So B is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? In 1930, Japanese-American artist Chihiro Obata depicted the natural beauty of Yosemite National Park in two memorable woodcuts, Evening at Carl Inn and Lake Bassin in the High Sierra. In 2019, Blank exhibited alongside 150 of Obata's other works in a single artist show at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. So, choice A says it was. This is incorrect because the singular pronoun it doesn't agree with the plural antecedent woodcuts. B. They were. This seems to be correct because the plural pronoun they agrees with the plural antecedent woodcuts. C. This was. This is incorrect for the same reason as A, because the singular pronoun this doesn't agree with the plural antecedent woodcuts. D. Somewhere. This is incorrect because it would be illogical to say some of two woodcuts. So D is incorrect, and B is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? American writer Edgewick Danticat, who emigrated from Haiti in 1981, has won acclaim for her powerful short stories, novels, and blank. Her lyrical yet unflinching depictions of her native country's turbulent history. Writer Robert Antonio has compared Danticat to Nobel Prize-winning novelist Toni Morrison. So option A says, essays, praising. This is incorrect because this results in a comma splice, where a comma is simply put between two independent clauses. B. Essays and praising. This is incorrect because a conjunction can't connect two independent clauses without a comma before it. C. Essays praising. This is incorrect because this is now a run-on sentence. There needs to be a comma with a conjunction, or the sentence needs to be split into two. D. Essays praising. This is correct because it properly creates two sentences, and the second sentence as well is created with a participle phrase that makes sense, because it says praising her lyrical yet unflinching depictions of her native country's turbulent history. So D is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? In 1966, Emmett Ashford became the first African American to umpire a Major League Baseball game. His energetic gestures announcing when a player had struck out, and his habit of barreling after a hit to see if it would land out of blank, transformed the traditionally solemn umpire role into a dynamic one. So enter choice. So the key part of this is the aspect of a finite verb. A finite verb is a verb that has a subject and establishes the tense. So the proper tense here would be past tense, and there are only two options here that has correct past tense, A and C. So both B and D are incorrect, which both have a present tense. So between A and C, A is correct because it properly establishes a finite verb, helped, that establishes the subject and establishes the tense, which is in past tense. C is incorrect because it includes that, which when included would make the sentence illogical. So A is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? In crafting her fantasy fiction, Nigerian-born British author Helen Oyeyemi has drawn inspiration from the classic 19th century fairy tale of the Brothers Grimm. Her 2014 novel, Boy, Snow, Bird, for instance, is a complex retelling of the story of Snow White, while her 2019 novel, Blink, offers a delicious twist on the classic tale of Hansel and Gretel. So the key rule here is that when a subject, her 2019 novel, Gingerbread, is followed by a verb, offers, there's no need for any punctuation. So there's no need for any dash, comma, or colon. The proper answer here would be C, no punctuation at all. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? The violins handmade in the 17th century by Italian craftsman Antonio Stradivari have been celebrated as some of the finest in the world. In close collaboration with musicians, Stradivari introduced changes to the shape of a traditional violin, flattening some of the instrument's curves and making blank lighter overall. So choice A says those. This is incorrect because the plural pronoun those doesn't agree with the singular antecedent violin. B. 1. This is incorrect because this would leave ambiguous what was made lighter, the violin or the curves. C. Them. This is incorrect because the plural pronoun them doesn't agree with the singular antecedent violin. D. It. This is correct because the singular pronoun it agrees with the singular antecedent violin. So D is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? During the English neoclassical period, 1660 to 1789, many writers imitated the epic poetry and satires of ancient Greece and Rome. They are not the first in England to adopt the literary mode of classical blank. Some of the most prominent figures of the earlier Renaissance period were also influenced by ancient Greek and Roman literature. A. Antiquity, however. This is incorrect because there is no punctuation after however to separate the two independent clauses. B. Antiquity, however, This is incorrect because the comma after however cannot be used to separate the two independent clauses in this manner. C. Antiquity, however, semicolon. This seems to be correct because the comma before however is used properly to separate the independent clause from the phrase that modifies it, and the semicolon after however is used properly to separate the two independent clauses. So C seems to be the correct answer. D. Antiquity, semicolon, however, This is incorrect because the however is illogically placed in the second independent clause, whereas it should be placed in the first independent clause. So D is incorrect, and C is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? One poll taken after the first 1960 presidential debate suggested that John Kennedy lost badly. Only 21% of those who listened on the radio rated him the winner. Blank. The debate was ultimately considered a victory for the telegenic young senator, who rated it higher than his opponent, Vice President Richard Nixon, among those watching on the new medium of television. This passage is saying that on one poll on radio, John Kennedy lost badly. Only 21% of people rated him the winner, but he ultimately won the debate by rating higher on television. So these two sentences contrast each other, and the transition word here must emphasize this contrast. A. In other words. This is incorrect because it's saying that the claim in this sentence, the second sentence, is based off data in the first one, but this is incorrect because the two sentences contrast each other. So A is incorrect. B. Therefore. This is incorrect for the same reason as A, because therefore would mean that the claim in this second sentence is based off the data in the first one, but that's not true because the two sentences contrast each other. C. Likewise. This is incorrect because this would compare the two sentences, but these two sentences contrast each other, not compare. D. Nevertheless. This is correct because it's suggesting that despite losing the poll on the radio, he ultimately won the debate, which follows with what the passage is saying. So D is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? In November 1934, Amrita Shergill was living in what must have seemed like the ideal city for a young artist, Paris. She was studying firsthand the color-saturated style of France's modernist masters, and beginning to make a name for herself as a painter. Blank. Shergill longed to return to her childhood home of India. Only there, she believed, could her art truly flourish. So the first sentence discusses Paris and its attributes and how it's good for a young artist, where she could learn from master artists and she could make a name for herself as a painter. But the second sentence discusses how she wanted to return to India, where she believed her art could truly flourish. So there's a contrast between these two sentences, and the transition word here must emphasize this contrast. A. Still. This makes sense here because it would highlight how despite Paris being a great place for her as an artist, she wanted to return to India, where she believed her art could truly flourish. So A seems to be the correct answer. B. Therefore. This is incorrect because therefore would mean that this discussion in the second sentence would be a consequence of the descriptions in the first sentence, but this is incorrect because the two sentences contrast each other. So B is incorrect. C. Indeed. This is incorrect because indeed adds emphasis to what was said before, but this is not what the two sentences do. Rather, they contrast each other. D. Furthermore. This is incorrect for the same reason as B, because furthermore, like therefore, emphasizes what was said in the first sentence, but this is not what occurs because these two sentences contrast each other. So A is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? In his 1925 book, The Morphology of Landscape, U.S. geographer Carl Saar challenged prevailing views about how natural landscapes influence human cultures. Blank, Saar argued that instead of being shaped entirely by their natural surroundings, cultures play an active role in their own development by virtue of their interaction with the environment. So the first sentence here highlights how Carl Saar challenged prevailing views. The second sentence goes into specifics about what his argument was. So the transition word between these two sentences must emphasize the relationship of these two sentences. A. Similarly. This is incorrect because similarly would imply that the second sentence is similar to the first one, but it's separate from it, which it is not, because the second sentence goes into the specifics of what was said in the first sentence. B. Finally. Finally would imply that the second sentence is like a last step, but we don't know whether it is, so finally wouldn't make sense here. C. Therefore. Therefore would imply that the second sentence is a result of the first sentence, but it's not. The second sentence goes into the specifics of the first sentence. D. Specifically. This seems to be correct, because specifically would imply that the second sentence goes into the specifics of the first one, which it does, where in the first sentence it says that Saar challenged prevailing views about how natural landscapes influence human cultures, and in the second sentence he states his argument, which is that instead of being shaped entirely by their natural surroundings, cultures play an active role in their own development. So D, specifically, is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? Although those who migrated to California in 1849 dreamed of finding gold nuggets in stream beds, the state's richest deposits were buried deeply in rock, beyond the reach of individual prospectors. Blank. By 1852, many had given up their fortune-hunting dreams and gone to work for one of the large companies capable of managing California's complex mining operations. So the first sentence here describes how many people migrated to California dreaming of finding gold nuggets, but these gold nuggets were buried deeply in rock, beyond the reach of individual prospectors. And the second sentence here shows that because of this, many workers had given up their dreams and worked for the larger mining companies capable of managing California's complex mining operations. So the transition between these two sentences must emphasize the consequence or result of the information in the first sentence. A. Furthermore. Furthermore is incorrect here, because furthermore would imply that the second sentence will discuss how the state's rich deposits were beyond the reach of individual prospectors, but this is incorrect, because the second sentence discusses how the prospectors gave up their dreams and went to work for the larger companies. B. Still. Still is incorrect, because still would imply that there's a contrast between the two sentences, when there's not, because the first sentence talks about how the rich deposits were buried deeply in rock. The second sentence talks about how, because of this, they gave up their dream and went to work for the mining operations. So B is incorrect. C. Consequently. Consequently makes sense here, because it makes sense that because the state's rich deposits were buried deeply in rock, and that this gold was inaccessible to individual prospectors, that they gave up their dreams and went to work for the California's complex mining operations. So C seems to be the correct answer. D. Next. Next is incorrect here, because next implies that the sentence will be the next step of a process, but this is incorrect, because there is no process. The second sentence simply is a result or a consequence of the information in the first sentence. So D is incorrect, and the answer is C. The student wants to present the Kwan Ho Kun study and its conclusions. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. In 2013, archaeologists studied cat bone fragments they had found in the ruins of Kwan Ho Kun, a Chinese farming village. The fragments were estimated to be 5,300 years old. A chemical analysis of the fragments revealed that the cats had consumed large amounts of grain. The grain consumption is evidence that the Kwan Ho Kun cats may have been domesticated. A. As part of a 2013 study of cat domestication, a chemical analysis was conducted on cat bone fragments found in Kwan Ho Kun, China. This is incorrect, because this only presents information on the Kwan Ho Kun study and not its conclusions. B. A 2013 analysis of cat bone fragments found in Guanhukun, China, suggests that cats there may have been domesticated 5,300 years ago. This seems to be correct because it presents information on both the Guanhukun study and its conclusions. On the study, it says that the Guanhukun study was analysis of cat bone fragments found in Guanhukun, China, and its conclusion is that cats there may have been domesticated 5,300 years ago. So B seems to be the correct choice. C. In 2013, archaeologists studied what cats in Guanhukun, China had eaten more than 5,000 years ago. This, like A, is incorrect because it presents information only on the Guanhukun study, not its conclusions. D. Cat bone fragments estimated to be 5,300 years old were found in Guanhukun, China in 2013. This is incorrect for the same reason as C and A were incorrect, because it only presents information on the Guanhukun study, not its conclusions. So D is incorrect, meaning B is the correct choice.
The student wants to emphasize a difference in the origins of two words. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. Started in 1925, the Scripps National Spelling Bee is a US-based spelling competition. The words used in the competition have diverse linguistic origins. In 2008, Samir Mishra won by correctly spelling the word guerdon. Guerdon derives from the Anglo-French word guerdon with a U. In 2009, Kavya Shiva Shankar won by correctly spelling the word Laodicean. Laodicean derives from the ancient Greek word Laodikeia. So, the student wants to emphasize a difference in the origin of the two words guerdon and Laodicean. So guerdon has an Anglo-French origin, while Laodicean has a Greek origin. So answer choice A says that guerdon, the final word of the 2008 Scripps National Spelling Bee, is of Anglo-French origin, while the following year's final word, Laodicean, derives from ancient Greek. So this answer choice seems good because it mentions that the word guerdon has an Anglo-French origin, while the following year's word has Greek origin. And the word while here emphasizes that one has an origin that is Anglo-French and then the other word has an origin that is Greek. So it's clearly contrasting between the two different origins of the two different words. Okay, so let's look at answer choice B. In 2008, Samir Mishra won the Scripps National Spelling Bee by correctly spelling the word guerdon. However, the following year, Kavya Shiva Shankar won based on spelling the word Laodicean. So B is not a good answer choice because the first part of the sentence is simply saying that he won by spelling the word guerdon and that she won by spelling the word Laodicean. It's not creating a contrast between the origins of the word, it's just creating a contrast between the words themselves. It should have mentioned that the origin of the word in 2008 was Anglo-French and that the origin of the word in the following year was Greek. So it's not creating a contrast between the origins of the words. It's creating, this answer choice is creating a contrast between the words themselves. So it's not a good answer choice. Answer choice C. Kavya Shiva Shankar won the 2009 Scripps National Spelling Bee by correctly spelling Laodicean, which derives from the ancient Greek word Laodikeia. Okay, this is not a good answer choice either, because this simply talks about one word, the word in 2009, and its origin. It should have also mentioned the word in the previous year and contrasted the origin of Laodicean with the origin of guerdon. But answer choice C did not do that. It only mentioned one word and its origin. So it's not emphasizing a difference between the origins of the two words. Okay, answer choice D says the Scripps National Spelling Bee uses words from diverse linguistic origins. such as Gurden and Laodicean. So it does mention that these words have diverse origins for both Gurden and Laodicean, but it doesn't emphasize the difference between the origins of these two words. It simply just says that the origins are diverse, not necessarily different. So answer choice A is much better than answer choice D because it says that the origin of Gurden is Anglo-French, while the origin of Laodicean is Greek. So it's creating that emphasis on the origin of Gurden and contrasting it with the origin of Laodicean very clearly, while answer choice D just mentions that they are diverse origins. So answer choice D is not very good, and answer choice A is the correct answer.